The soul gives birth to the spirit, and the spirit is what leads us. But down to thinking about parents and beating of their children, trying to beat them to submission, beat them to obey them, beat them to lead a life as they have said. I mean, of course, you don't want your child taking dangerous risks like playing with the fire, just certain things that children get into. But I think one has to ask themselves, is a beating really the consequence that they deserve? Because also in this particular chapter, she talks about a study that was done on dogs, and they were in a cage, and the scientists initially would have a shock under the right side, so the dog quickly learned, okay, I'm not going to sit on the right side of the cage. Then the scientists moved it to the left side, so the dog quickly learned, move over to the left side. Then the scientists got really sadistic and just would intermittently have the entire floor give off shocks. And what it found is the dog just gave up and would just take the shocks. And then after some time, the scientists opened up the cage and the dog didn't even leave. That is what happens to many humans. You get so beaten, so dogged down by life, so disappointed by the fallbacks that you stop. And it's so hard to get through or to give hope to a person who has let life get the better of them. This dog, he didn't have any power in the situation, but to see that even an open cage led to, there was no hope even with an open cage. That was pretty sad, disappointing, and just all around disappointing to hear. All right, 223. This sets up a yearning, an obsession, and finally an addiction to the other kind of red, the one of fast-breaking, cheap thrills, sex without soul, the one that leads to a life without meaning. So pretty much when you only are sacrificing, the yearn is not going to go away. You're going to fall into various obsessions, and myself, sugar. And you're going to eventually give into the addiction. But it's saying in such an intense way, through cheap thrills, sex without a soul, meaning you're interacting with this person where there's no deep love, no deep commitment, and so therefore you're not even getting the best experience of that interaction because you guys don't have a closeness that one needs to have an intense, say, tantric level experience of it. All right, I'm on 228. It is important to keep our eyes open and to carefully weigh offers of an easier existence, a trouble-free path, especially if in exchange we are asked to surrender our personal creative joy to cremating fire rather than enkindling one of our own making. That's pretty powerful. So this young girl who was taken in by the old woman, she was a wild young girl. Remember, she had been living out in the woods, the forest, foraging for her food, begging for her food. She was living a life where she made her own decisions. And so now that she was taken into a home, she was forced to dress a certain way, sit with her legs closed, only talk if an adult asked her a question. And so this was far from what she had been, what she has known. I know for me personally, I remember when I got engaged to this guy and I believed I loved him. And of course he was attracted to me, but once we got engaged, he was like, okay, you can't wear those clothes unless we're around each other. You need to not call any more of your male friends. If you hang out with a female friend, I will drop you off and pick you up. So all this craziness. Wait, you were drawn to me for a reason. You asked me to marry you for a reason. Do you realize by having me not experience these things that I enjoy, that's going to change me, to a point of possibly no return? So we have to think about this. Yes, I would have had the title wifey, the ring, the house, the car, the trips, but at what cost to my soul? I don't even know what type of woman I would have became through because of the restraints that he placed on me for wanting to be his wife. 229. When the personal soul life is burnt to ashes, a woman loses the vital treasure and begins to act dry-boned as death. In her unconscious, the desire for the red shoes, a wild joy, not only continues, it swells and floods, and eventually staggers to its feet and takes over, ferocious and famined. This makes me think about couples who are in relationships, and many couples or partners will know going into the relationship that they cannot be monogamous. They'll lie to themselves and say, okay, one person the rest of my life. And they'll try it out for a while, and then as the pressure of the relationship builds or the temptation mounts, they break and they lose their mind. And then here it is, a fractured couple now. When I think we need to take time to strengthen ourselves, or even if the goal is to not be monogamous, seek a partner who's okay with that goal, rather than subject a person who expects that of you, subject them to you cheating. I think more than anything, people have to learn to be honest with themselves and realize there is a person out there who is completely fine with the choices that you want in your life. There is a match for everyone. Don't waste someone else's time or your time lying and living a life that isn't conducive to the life that your spirit, where it is right now, fractured, whole, quarter, whatever, what your spirit wants. 232. Lack of fleeing when it is absolutely warranted causes depression, which is another trap. So back to the relationship I was talking about. I have been in that relationship. I was in a relationship, I want to say 8 or 9 years. Crazy, right? I knew early on that I needed to flee, but I didn't, because I did enjoy the gifts that came with the relationship. I enjoyed the trips. However, the bad was exhausting. And like it said, like the passage I just read, when you're in something and the bad is bad, the control, it leads to a depression. And I don't even know that I knew I was depressed. I knew that I was getting heavier, and certainly because I was eating even more sugar. But I wasn't completely clear. I knew my happiness quotient had diminished, which is another sign of depression. 237. The shadow life occurs when writers, painters, dancers, mothers, seekers, mystics, students, or journey women stop writing, painting, dancing, mothering, looking, peering, learning, practicing. They might stop because whatever they just spent long with did not come out the way they had hoped, or did not receive the recognition it deserved, or countless other reasons. When the maker stops for whatever reason, the energy that naturally flows to her is diverted underground, where it surfaces whenever and wherever it can. Because a woman feels she cannot in daylight go full bore at whatever it is she wants, she begins to lead a strange double life, pretending one thing in the daylight hours, acting another way when she gets a chance. Wow. Yeah, I guess that's the bottom line. If a painter does not paint, those fits or those needs to create are going to come out in some way, and not necessarily in a brilliant way, because you are therefore suppressing that creative energy. And in that suppression, it is likely to express itself in a dark, seedy way, because it's your shadowing that's working with that unused, untapped energy. Further down on the page, a woman can be outwardly polite and even cynical, but inwardly hemorrhaging. So you're bleeding to death because your soul is so aching to be full, to be happy, to express itself, but you're denying it that. And sometimes when you're depressed, you can't help but deny it that. When you get to a point where you don't want to do the things that you love to do, then you need to know it's very likely that you are depressed. 249. It is not the joy of life that kills the spirit of the child in the red shoes. It is the lack of it. When a woman is unconscious about her starvation, about the consequences of using death-dealing vehicles and substances, she is dancing. She is dancing. Whether these are such things as negative thinking, poor relationships, abusive situations, drugs, or alcohol, they are like the red shoes, hard to pry a person from once they have taken hold. The red shoes danced her out of the house, down the street, into dark, scary places, led to a curse being put on her to the point where she had to ask someone to chop her ankles off so that she would not be bound to the red shoes anymore. 253. The psychological soul plan for coming back into one's own is as follows. Take extra special caution and care to loose yourself into the wild gradually, setting up an ethical or protective structure by which you have some tools to measure when something is too much. You are usually already very sensitive to when something is too little. I guess what I think in terms of that passage is, like, you can't just, life was hard, you were a hardcore drug addict sleeping around, and then next day you decide you want to become a monk or a nun. Well, that's too extreme. I think it's saying ease back into it. I know for myself, when I realized I was in trouble, I got some plants. I made a routine out of getting up, giving the ones water that needed water, pulling off the dead leaves. And so for me, easing back into my wildish side meant taking care of nature, walking barefoot on the grass, feeling the heat of rocks, letting the sun beam upon my skin. All of this is helping me get back in tune with my natural side, with my instincts, with myself. 254. Surround yourself with people who unequivocally support you, your work. It is both a trap and a poison to have so-called friends who have the same injuries but no real desire to heal. These kinds of friends encourage you to act outrageously, outside of your natural cycles, out of sync with your soul needs. A filial woman cannot afford to be naive. As she returns to her innate life, she must consider excesses with a skeptical eye and be aware of their cost to the soul, psyche, instinct. Like the wolf pup, we must memorize the traps, how they are made. My biggest takeaway with this particular chapter is that you want to watch the people you're hanging around with. Sometimes we're attracted to the people who also have the same who've gone through the same trauma. But if in their trauma they're not doing the work to heal themselves, that will not necessarily be good for you. If in their trauma they decide to drink, they want glasses of wine every day, or just some hard liquor, or smoking, these obsessions, these addictions are not necessarily healing. Now, I know a lot of people believe in wine and say it's healthy. Okay, that's their choice. But if it's not your choice, realize that you can be influenced during this time of healing. So just be more mindful of the traps that can happen. And she also talks about that if you are not willing to howl like a wolf, how are you going to find your pact? Your voice needs to be heard. You need to do the work. And I think when you do the work, it becomes obvious to other people. They can see it pulsating from you. They can see, wow, this woman is changed. This woman is different. This woman is doing and walking and talking differently. Let it happen. Don't drop one addiction and therefore pick up another one. The goal is to be healed. The goal is to empower. The goal is to move forward. The goal is to thrive. Not simply to just survive. Oh, I made it through. No, I achieved. I'm living with wholeness. I'm living to the fullness of all of my desires. I do hope you got something from this chapter. I do hope you come back for another episode. I do hope you are subscribed. That is how I would receive it as support, and it would be encouragement to know that what I'm doing is actually encouraging and inspiring other people.